The glittering lights of the global entertainment industry often blind us to the harsh realities hidden behind the pristine facades of celebrity lives. For years, the public has consumed the carefully curated images of Hollywood elite, believing in the flawless fairy tales presented on glossy magazine covers and pristine social media feeds. We watch as breathtaking individuals ascend to the pinnacle of fame, assuming that their wealth, beauty, and status insulate them from the standard heartaches of the human condition. Yet, behind the velvet ropes and the flashing cameras of the paparazzi, a much darker, far more turbulent reality frequently plays out. It is a world where public adulation does not guarantee private happiness, and where the sudden collapse of a high-profile marriage can transform a global icon into a figure of intense public scrutiny and profound personal isolation. This is the starting point of an extraordinary transformation, a journey that challenges everything we think we know about modern celebrity culture, vulnerability, and the desperate quest for personal reinvention in the wake of total emotional devastation. To understand the gravity of this unfolding story, and to ensure you never miss our deep dives into the hidden lives of the world's most fascinating figures, please take a brief moment right now to hit the subscribe button and turn on all notifications. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these meticulously researched, highly detailed investigative reports into the human stories behind the massive global headlines when a famous union dissolves under the harsh glare of the international media spotlight. The fallout is rarely contained to legal documents and formal press releases. Instead, it becomes a public spectacle, a narrative written by outsiders, onlookers, and anonymous sources who dissect every frame of the individual's lives. The transition from being half of an envied power couple to walking the world alone is a jarring experience, compounded exponentially when the split is surrounded by whispers of betrayal, infidelity, and broken trust. For a woman who has spent her entire adult life being defined by her physical appearance and celebrated as an ultimate standard of modern beauty, the sudden shift in public perception can be deeply disorienting. Suddenly, the gaze of the world changes from one of intense desire and admiration to one of pity, condescension, and morbid curiosity. The collective gaze of millions becomes a heavy burden, a mirror reflecting an image of someone who was discarded, someone who failed to keep her domestic paradise intact, despite possessing everything society deems desirable. This agonizing shift creates a profound psychological crisis, forcing an international superstar to confront her deepest, most deep-seated childhood fears about motherhood, independence, and the terrifying prospect of becoming a single parent in a world that routinely judges women far more harshly than men. The story begins in earnest with the shocking, rapid disintegration of what many believe to be a stable and enduring creative partnership. The marriage, which had begun with the casual intimacy of a courthouse ceremony, seemed to represent a modern approach to romance, blending the worlds of high fashion and independent cinema. For a time, the couple seemed to navigate the complex waters of New York and Los Angeles society with ease, culminating in the arrival of their first child, a beautiful son whose birth was celebrated by fans worldwide. However, behind the closed doors of their private residence, the foundations of this seemingly perfect life were already eroding at an alarming pace. The passage of time during this period was described as both instantaneous and agonizingly slow, an agonizing paradox where days bled together in a haze of growing emotional distance and unspoken tension. Within months of their child's birth, the intimate connection that had once bound the couple together completely vanished, giving way to an icy celibacy and an overwhelming sense of impending doom. The silence within the home became deafening, a clear indicator that the partnership was terminal. Even as the outside world remained completely oblivious to the gathering storm clouds, when the inevitable separation finally occurred and the news leaked to the global press, it did not happen quietly. Instead, it was accompanied by a torrent of scandalous revelations and sordid allegations regarding the husband's conduct throughout the marriage. Anonymous insiders and close associates began coming forward to the media, painting a devastating portrait of a serial cheater whose fidelity had been a complete illusion from the very beginning. The public, fueled by sensationalist headlines and internet gossip, eagerly devoured every detail of the betrayal, turning the painful demise of a family into a viral content sensation. The sheer disrespect of the situation was magnified by the fact that the husband was a prominent figure in the independent film industry, known for producing gritty, high-stakes dramas that often explored the darker sides of human nature. To see those themes of deception and chaos play out in his actual personal life, at the direct expense of his famous wife and newborn infant, sent shockwaves through the entertainment community and left the public demanding answers. For the young mother left standing in the ruins of her marriage, the immediate aftermath of the split was not characterized by a peaceful period of mourning or private reflection. Instead, she found herself trapped in a suffocating web of public sympathy that felt more insulting than the betrayal itself. Everywhere she went, she was met with furrowed brows, heavy sighs, and soft, condescending expressions of pity from colleagues, acquaintances, and total strangers. This collective reaction was deeply offensive to her sense of self, as she realized that the world now viewed her as a tragic figure, a pathetic reject who had been abandoned by her partner. Furthermore, the presence of her young child, rather than being seen purely as a source of joy, was viewed by the public as a heavy burden, a complicating factor that rendered her less desirable and more vulnerable in the eyes of society. This perception tapped directly into a lifelong phobia she had carried since her own youth, a terrifying dread of becoming a single mother, a role she had always associated with a complete loss of personal freedom, an absence of choices, and the permanent closure of any emergency exit from life's hardships. Faced with this intolerable public narrative and determined to smash the image of the tragic, abandoned wife, she made a conscious, calculated decision to completely reinvent her public and private persona. She refused to accept the role of the victim, rejecting the soft comfort of public sympathy in favor of something far more aggressive, dangerous, and provocative. If the world wanted to view her through a specific lens, she would completely subvert their expectations by transforming herself into a calculated, man-eating femme fatale, a modern-day villain inspired by the hypersexualized, terrifying anti-heroines of popular culture. This new character would not seek approval or love, nor would she offer the traditional warmth of a devoted mother or a faithful partner. Instead, she would move through the elite dating scenes of the world's major capitals like a predator, treating romance not as a sacred bond, but as a field of battle where she held all the power and dictated all the terms. Fueled by numerous gin martinis and a desire to completely erase the memory of the loyal, rejected wife she had briefly been, she stepped boldly into a whirlwind of casual encounters, high-profile flings, and shocking public displays that would soon push her to the absolute forefront of global celebrity gossip, setting the stage for a spectacular, chaotic exploration of modern female autonomy. The deliberate creation of this fierce, predatory alter ego marked the beginning of an era characterized by intense, near-compulsive romantic experimentation, a phase designed to thoroughly incinerate any lingering remnants of the traditional good girl image she had maintained for so long. For years, she had subscribed to the deeply ingrained societal myth that a woman's devotion, her adherence to the rules of monogamy, and her performance of idealized femininity would serve as a magical shield against heartbreak and disrespect. Having discovered the ultimate futility of that belief through a bruising public betrayal, she made a conscious decision to fundamentally alter her approach to intimacy and human connection. She looked at the men around her, individuals who had navigated their entire adult lives with an effortless freedom to indulge in casual, consequence-free encounters without ever facing the threat of social degradation or personal devaluation. She realized there was a massive double standard at play, a painful dissonance where men could casually boast about past conquests while remaining highly sought-after partners, while women were expected to remain pristine, gatekeeping their sexuality to stay worthy of long-term love and respect. Determined to bridge this gap and claim that exact same reckless autonomy for herself, she embarked on a mission to completely disassemble her internal architecture, seeking to replace the innocent, pure archetype with an unapologetic, hypersexualized persona that refused to be bound by conventional moral expectations or the fragile feelings of others. Her initial foray into this uncharted territory, however, immediately exposed her to the bizarre, chaotic, and often unsettling realities of the modern elite dating scene. Free from the protective confines of her former marriage, her very first post-divorce encounter took place with a prominent, completely sober disc jockey who happened to reside a mere 2 blocks away from the luxurious home she had once shared with her husband. What was intended to be a smooth, sophisticated reintroduction to singlehood quickly devolved into an exercise in profound awkwardness and psychological shock. Almost immediately upon sitting down, her date bypassed standard pleasantries and launched into a highly inappropriate, deeply unprompted revelation, declaring that incestuous tendencies ran openly within his immediate family. He then proceeded to narrate a highly explicit, uncomfortable anecdote about a time his mother and sister had walked in on him engaging in an intimate solo act, while watching adult entertainment that he openly characterized as sibling-themed content. While she did not engage in any physical intimacy with this individual, viewing him as a completely bizarre anomaly rather than the norm, the encounter served as a startling wake-up call regarding the strange, unhinged world she was about to navigate. Undeterred by this disastrous opening salvo, she continued her exploration, later involving herself with an older individual whom her close friends openly derided as physically unattractive. This particular companion possessed an intense fondness for explicit, aggressive verbal roleplay during intimacy, a trait she actually found somewhat grating and unappealing. Yet, she deliberately chose to remain in the relationship for a prolonged period, driven entirely by the intoxicating ego boost of being with someone who clearly desired her far more than she could ever desire him. Using his desperate adoration as a soothing balm for her wounded pride, as her campaign of compulsive dating gained significant momentum, the scale of her encounters expanded from obscure local figures to some of the most visible, talked-about men in the global entertainment landscape. The international press, sensing an unprecedented shift in her behavior, began tracking her movements with a feverish intensity, transforming her personal life into a daily serialized drama consumed by millions. She was linked to iconic Hollywood leading men, navigating complex rumors of a romance with none other than Brad Pitt, an association that immediately elevated her single era into the realm of modern pop culture legend. Not long after, she was captured by photographers in the company of Pete Davidson, a comedian whose notorious string of high-profile relationships with stunning women had already made him a subject of intense public curiosity and endless internet speculation. Her involvement with him only added immense fuel to the ongoing public discourse surrounding his unique appeal and magnetic charm, cementing her status as a woman who was actively choosing to exist at the very epicenter of contemporary celebrity culture. This whirlwind of comedic suitors continued when she was spotted attending a high-profile basketball game at Madison Square Garden on the eve of Valentine's Day alongside Eric Andre, another celebrated comedian known for his surreal, chaotic brand of humor. The images of them laughing and enjoying the high-stakes atmosphere of the arena sent a clear, undeniable message to the public that she was no longer mourning the past, but was instead actively reveling in the vibrant, unpredictable energy of the present. However, the true pinnacle of this headline-grabbing era occurred during a fateful trip to Tokyo, an event that would trigger an absolute firestorm of controversy and test the boundaries of her newly adopted philosophy. In the spring of 2023, global media outlets erupted when video footage and photographs surfaced, showing her passionately embracing and kissing global pop superstar Harry Styles on the streets of the Japanese capital. The imagery was electric, capturing a raw, unscripted moment of intense physical attraction between two of the most recognizable figures on the planet. Yet, beneath the initial shock of the pairing lay a far more complicated and damaging social dynamic. Only months prior, the pop star had concluded a highly publicized, long-term relationship with director Olivia Wilde, a woman with whom the model had shared a visible, well-documented friendship. The sudden, public display of intimacy in Tokyo was immediately branded by insiders and media commentators as a devastating act of interpersonal betrayal. Sources close to the situation leaked exclusive details to major publications, revealing that the director felt utterly blindsided and deeply hurt by the actions of her friend, who had seemingly discarded the unwritten rules of female solidarity for the sake of a fleeting, passionate moment in a foreign city. When later confronted with the massive wave of public backlash and intense moral scrutiny that followed the incident, the model exhibited a remarkably detached, almost cold attitude, casually dismissing the gravity of the kiss by stating in major interviews that she had not been actively focusing on men or relationships at the time, and that sometimes, unexpected things simply happen in the heat of the moment. This unapologetic approach to her personal freedom continued to manifest at elite gatherings of the ultra-wealthy and famous, most notably during an exclusive 4th of July celebration hosted by a prominent billionaire in the Hamptons. At this legendary white party event, which drew the absolute peak of sports, fashion, and Hollywood royalty, she was observed locked in deep, intense conversation with newly single NFL legend Tom Brady, sparking an immediate wave of fresh romance rumors that dominated sports and entertainment blogs for weeks. Though that particular connection did not materialize into a sustained romance, as the legendary quarterback soon pivoted to a relationship with an iconic Russian supermodel, she refused to slow down her dizzying pace. Before long, she shifted her focus internationally once again, embarking on a passionate, highly visible fling with celebrated French actor Stéphane Bach, known for his compelling work in acclaimed auteur cinema. The pair sent paparazzi into an absolute frenzy when they were photographed stealing passionate, cinematic kisses on the cobblestone streets of Paris in the autumn of 2023. While the romantic backdrop of the French capital suggested a profound, sweeping love story, industry insiders were quick to clarify to the press that the relationship was entirely casual, a temporary indulgence in mutual pleasure, and a good time without any long-term commitments or serious expectations. Through this relentless, dazzling succession of high-profile partners, she had successfully shifted the global narrative surrounding her life, completely drowning out the whispers of her husband's infidelity with a deafening roar of spectacular, self-directed romantic conquests, proving to the world that she was entirely capable of playing the dating game by her own rules. The spectacular, public whirlwind of high-profile romances and geographic transitions served as a highly effective distraction, but it could not permanently obscure the deeper, more profound psychological shifts taking place within her inner world. As she continued to navigate this intense period of self-directed liberation, she began to form startling, deeply unconventional realizations about the hidden dynamics of modern attraction, particularly regarding how powerful men perceive the concept of motherhood. Throughout her life, she had harbored a deep-seated belief that mainstream society viewed single mothers as inherently diminished, assuming that the immense baggage and daily sacrifice of raising a child would render a woman fundamentally unappealing to suitors seeking casual romance or light-hearted companionship. To her immense surprise, her extensive experiences on the dating scene completely overturned this assumption, revealing a far more complex and psychological reality. She discovered that a remarkable number of successful men were actually deeply drawn to the concept of motherhood, displaying a distinct, almost magnetic attraction to the qualities of self-sacrifice and emotional maturity that define a parent. She realized that many of these individuals, having spent years immersed in the profound loneliness and emptiness that inevitably accompanies a life of absolute selfishness and career obsession, viewed her devotion to her young son not as a hindrance, but as an incredibly beautiful, comforting virtue. It raised profound, slightly unsettling questions in her mind about whether these men were seeking a traditional romantic equal, or if they were subconsciously yearning for a maternal figure who could offer them the unconditional care and emotional security they so desperately lacked in their own hyper-competitive lives. Yet, this profound journey of self-discovery was not merely about understanding the psychological motivations of others. It was a deliberate, scorched-earth campaign to completely dismantle her own deeply ingrained identity. For her entire adult existence, she had worked tirelessly to maintain a pristine balance, striving to embody the idealized, almost sacred archetype of the special, perfect woman who could seamlessly transition into a devoted wife and a nurturing mother. She had given everything to this ideal, enduring the profound physical and emotional trauma of bringing an 8-pound infant into the world, an experience that had fundamentally altered her body and her perception of her own vulnerability. To see that immense sacrifice met with casual, serial infidelity from her former partner had shattered something fundamental within her psyche, creating an intense, burning desire to completely destroy the innocent facade she had worked so hard to construct. She no longer wished to be the protected, virtuous woman who waited patiently for a man's loyalty. Instead, she made a conscious, highly calculated decision to fully embrace the opposite end of the spectrum. She chose to boldly step into an identity that society frequently uses to shame and control independent women, reclaiming the raw, primal power of absolute sexual autonomy, and using it as a weapon to assert her complete dominance over every room she entered and every individual she encountered. The ultimate expression of this radical psychological transformation manifested in a shocking, deeply intimate encounter that she would later choose to share with the entire world, a moment that perfectly encapsulated her transition from a vulnerable victim to an absolute apex predator. She found herself on a casual bar date with a man who embodied almost every cliché of modern, ostentatious youth culture, an individual characterized by a distinct, nasally voice, wearing excessively bright hoodies and a massive amount of obnoxious, heavy gold jewelry that made him resemble a living caricature from the early days of social media internet culture. Despite the superficial and somewhat grating nature of his appearance, she accompanied him back to his private apartment, where she deliberately initiated a deeply submissive, highly explicit physical act. As she knelt before him in the quiet intimacy of that room, she found herself experiencing a profound, almost intoxicating sense of satisfaction, derived entirely from the look of absolute, stunned disbelief written across his face as he gazed down at her. In that precise moment, the reality of her immense global status collided with the raw immediacy of the act. As a world-famous supermodel, a woman universally celebrated as one of the ultimate symbols of modern physical perfection, willingly bestowed her attention upon him. He openly compared her majestic appearance to that of ancient royalty, completely overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the moment, while she felt an intense, primal rush of empowerment, realizing that she had found exactly what she had come for, embodying the terrifying, magnificent energy of a praying mantis completely devouring her mate in an act of absolute control. This raw, unfiltered encounter stood in stark, undeniable contrast to her entire romantic history prior to the collapse of her marriage, a past that had been defined by a deep need for emotional safety and traditional validation. Before embarking on this chaotic post-divorce era, she had only shared physical intimacy with a mere 8 individuals across her entire life, a remarkably small number for someone existing at the very center of the global fashion and entertainment industries. In every single one of those past relationships, she had operated under the assumption that her partners would inevitably fall deeply in love with her, a belief she clung to because she desperately needed to feel precious, protected, and uniquely valued. She had spent her youth harboring the conventional, deeply damaging societal perception that men would never truly love, cherish, or build long-term families with women who displayed a free, uninhibited attitude toward their own sexuality. The shattering of her marriage, despite her strict adherence to the rules of the traditional good girl persona, had permanently exposed the complete falsehood of that myth, freeing her from the heavy chains of her own past inhibitions and allowing her to step boldly into a brave new world where her pleasure and her autonomy were the only rules that mattered. As this extraordinary saga of public reinvention and private rebellion reached its absolute peak, the dark reality of the world she had left behind continued to grind forward in the background, offering a stark reminder of why her radical transformation had been so utterly necessary. While she was busy dominating global headlines with her fearless lifestyle, her former husband found himself completely engulfed by a severe career-ending storm of legal and moral controversies. Serious allegations regarding inappropriate behavior and grooming emerged against the independent film producer, leading to his swift, highly publicized termination from the prominent production company he had helped elevate to Hollywood prominence. He found himself utterly entangled in a complex web of intense legal mediations, bitter divorce proceedings, and a highly sensitive custody battle over their young son. His reputation permanently tarnished as the dark reality of his personal conduct was thoroughly exposed to the world. Throughout this agonizing process, the young mother maintained a remarkably guarded, highly strategic silence in the public square, refusing to offer detailed commentary on the sordid details of her ex-husband's downfall. She openly admitted that this restraint was born from a profound, very real fear that outspoken, fiercely independent women are routinely penalized by traditional legal systems, frequently losing custody of their beloved children if they dare to speak too loudly or too candidly about the powerful men who wronged them. By choosing instead to channel her immense pain, anger, and betrayal into a brilliant, highly provocative literary essay for a prestigious publication, accompanied by a shocking, boundary-pushing visual campaign that challenged every conventional norm of motherhood and femininity, she successfully seized absolute control of her own narrative. She proved to a global audience that she was no longer a tragic figure to be pitied, but a fierce, utterly unstoppable force who had successfully rewritten the rules of survival, autonomy, and personal reinvention in the modern age.